Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. We are in the studio, in the depths of the labyrinth of comics creator Ed Bickford. I'm seeing whiteboards with due dates and deadlines and creating materials and all sorts of things. That's the brain child center of creating, I believe is where we are. Is that true?
It's the more like the dungeon of creating.
Ah, okay.
No, it's actually really neat. I My wife works at she's a teacher, but she also works at Michael's,
Oh, okay. Hmm.
so she has
Hmm.
an employee discount. So I have a lot of art supplies, and then also the local art store, like the Dick Blick. Dick Blick, before it was Dick Blick, was Utrecht.
Hmm. Hmm.
They went out. They would get rid of certain stuff, and they knew me well enough, and they would call me if they had. So I got like paint this, like the little things that hold paint at the store.
Yeah,
So I,
yeah.
I always tell people it's like I basically have an art store in my studio. Basically, it's in the basement. In the
Nice.
house we have, the room I'm in is under my garage. So my art studio is about the size of a two-car garage, and there's two
Yeah.
cars above me. So sometimes that's kind of scary to think about. But I have to go. But yeah,
Hopefully the foundation is solid.
it's been solid since the 50s, so I think I'm good to go.
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely. So I'll mention a couple of titles here, a couple of spaces where people can go and connect to your work, and then we can sort of dive into your inspirations a bit. So I'll mention American Chop Suey, Simon and Schuster published. And then on a slightly different thematic and kind of mood-based approach, you've also done work for Scout, excuse me, Scout Comics. Almost said Scott Comics, and that is, I believe, Comicos. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Comic
Comicos.
House.
Comic House. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I think they took it. I think it's German.
Yes,
It's,
yes, that would
it's a
explain the
German when you say
house.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so so a couple of different approaches. So curious to talk about that and curious about what it is about comics in general that sort of allows you and enables you to tell the stories that you want to tell.
Well, um, let's see. I think trying to figure out where to start now that I like I like to draw, and
Hmm. Hmm.
I've been drawing since I can even remember. I were the oldest memory I have is I don't think I was even in school yet, or maybe I was in kindergarten or first grade. I remember it was before Christmas, and I drew like all these pictures of elves loading Santa's sleigh, and all like I bet you it was like at least five or six drawings,
Hmm.
and I left them for Santa Claus to take, right? And Saturday morning or Christmas morning, I woke up and I went downstairs. Went downstairs and I was upset because Santa Claus didn't take my drawings. He didn't like them because they were still there, and I was like, oh, that was pretty upsetting. I remember that. And after that, I don't know. I think third grade, I saw the movie Grease,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I just drew Grease lightnings for like the whole rest of the year for third grade. And then fourth grade, I don't remember doing that much art in fourth grade, but fifth grade, I think it was a movie called Damnation Alley. You ever seen that one with George Papard and Michael Jan Benson?
I have not. I'll have to check it out.
It was a post-apocalyptic movie, and they're in
Hmm.
this RV, post-apocalyptic RV thing with a dirt bike and
Hmm.
stuff in it. Actually, I think that might have been. Oh, excuse me. Maybe that was in sixth grade, and I just drew those for a while. And then we had a book fair in sixth grade, and I got a Flash Gordon black and white digest size
Hmm.
book,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I read that and loved the art in it. And then somehow one day I thought I was like, ooh, I like this picture, and I drew from it, and I realized like, whoa, I was like, wow, I'm actually really good at copying this stuff. And then I think
Yeah.
I did a couple of Green Lantern pictures from my step grandfather's comics he had. And after that, it was just I drew even more. And I was the kid that was in the back of class in high school and junior high that was always drawing instead of paying attention in class. I drew all the time. I think, and as an adult, I joined the military 2 weeks out of high school, and the recruiter told me, "Oh, I wanted to go to art so bad, but my dad was like, go electronics. That's where the thing's at. That's where the money's at these days." And this is like 1987, 88.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay. And the recruiter was like, "Oh, we don't have artists in the Air Force." And so I went through all that stuff. I went through basic, and I went through others. And I get to my first base, and what do they have? They have a detachment that does graphic design. And I was so mad. And then they had because it didn't have to be just that, because they also had in civil engineering they had surveyors, and they still got to draw, draw the the elevations and all that, the surveyor artwork. Because I mean, I did drafting and architecture also in high school. I had
Hmm.
anything to draw, I just, and I was like, man, I felt so cheap, ripped off, cheated.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I finished all that, and then I got out and I found a job. I did a whole bunch of different other jobs, and I finally landed a job fixing copiers, and I did that, and I met my wife. And then at the tender age of 33, I finally figured out that my GI Bill was running out, so I got to go to art school for finally. So I went to Central Missouri State University, which is University of Central Missouri now.
Hmm.
So I actually have 2 degrees, because in the middle of my senior year, last semester, they changed the name. So I have 2 diplomas in 2 BFAs in art from the both names for commercial art, emphasis and illustration. So
Very
I did
cool.
that, and then I'm still pursuing that illustration thing. And that may be a bit too much you wanted to hear, but I don't know.
No, no, that's cool. You're the first person that I've had on the show who's mentioned Grease as an inspiration. So I love that because, um, I love the movie first of all, but just thinking about kind of the visual nature of that story too, like almost kind of a living Archie comic kind of a thing,
Right.
really. Yeah.
And then later in life, I never knew how dirty the song "Grease Lightning" was until you're an adult and you hear
I
the lyrics. You're
know.
like, what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah.
singing that as a kid, you have no idea. Yeah, I've had the same experience there too. Yeah. So curious about this range from Comic House and Scout Comics to American Chop Suey. Curious about that range of inspiration that you bring.
Um, Comic House was my buddy. I wasn't confident in my writing, so I worked with a guy that was a writer a lot. It was
Hmm.
Aaron Walters, and he and we did a book we were working on. It was a graphic novel called The Birdlander, which is
Hmm.
about a young woman, and she's looking for the Birdlander, who's this legendary. It's a post-apocalyptic world. I do a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff,
That's some of my favorite stuff, actually.
and she's in this post-apocalyptic world looking for this Birdlander guy because it's her father,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
she's heard all these crazy stories about him, and so she's looking for him, and it's like a it's kind of weird because the name's bigger than the legend. The legend and all the stories are bigger than the guy really is. It's just
Hmm. Hmm.
it's all exaggerated, and she's looking for him. And so we did that, and somebody liked it. We had the guys from Comic House liked it so much they wanted to publish it, but we already had it working with another publisher at the time. We were talking to somebody, so we said, what if we made a spinoff? And because we had another idea, it was a spinoff in the same universe called the Troubleshooters, which these 2 guys, they would go around and they would just do odd jobs, kind of like the A Team or whatever, just kind of like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And so that's how we got that in a Comic House. So we did a spinoff of that called the Troubleshooters. And then I think because Comic House was based in Great Britain, it just was so expensive for them to send us our comp copies.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we were supposed to finish it up and send it in, and I never got around to it because I when I was in college, I had this idea about I had it started out with a rabbit, and I made so he was like a samurai rabbit, and then it just kind of spun out of control there, and it just got more goofier and goofier. And I would talk with this one guy at the grocery store, and him and I would just bounce ideas off each other all the time, and it just made me laugh. And I got to the point where, I mean, my wife's a librarian for elementary school,
Hmm.
in elementary school, and so I have a lot of access to children's books and illustrators. And with my degree is really not in comics; it's more in illustration. And so I really do like I know that the thing is right. The everyone's going digital
Hmm.
for all
Hmm.
their art. And I still don't want to do that because there's something about holding a piece of art you created in your hand and
Hmm.
finished it. But sometimes crunch deadlines, and also I do the digital colors because it's to me that you weren't there's a discrepancy between taking something that you watercolored and scanning it and then putting it in Photoshop and fixing it and then sending it to the printers and printing the color that it's a wider discrepancy than it is if you just did the colors in Photoshop, right?
Hmm.
So I do that sometimes, but I really do like traditional media more. And also, if you notice, it seems like a lot of children's books still have traditional media illustrations in them and not digital.
Hmm.
So to go back to Chop, we worked on, Aaron and I worked on, we did the Birdlander, and then we did Troubleshooters, and I didn't finish it because we started. I did a whole bunch of little vignettes and little things of these. They're Prairie Dog Ninja Scouts.
Hmm.
And the idea behind them was I wanted to get ridiculous because at the time I watched a lot of Disney Channel with my kids, and I just absolutely they got rid of sitcoms in the early 2000s. Remember that they get rid of
I do.
sitcoms and
Hmm.
everything. But the thing is like Wizards of Waverly Place was on, and like Harley came out, and Disney Channel was still doing sitcoms, and I'd watch those with the kids, and there's some of them were still really funny,
Hmm.
and it was clean and funny, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I wanted to make something, and I wanted to make. I had my kids, and I was like, I want to make something that my kids could read, and they could read. The Birdlander wasn't bad, and neither was Troubleshooters. It wasn't like not safe for work. It was just not. The kids would have no interest in it because it was more reading, and it just I don't know. I think Aaron wanted to make Birdlander a political thriller, and I was like, I didn't want to do that. Originally, it was supposed to be more like Road Warrior, but that's beside the point. But anyway, so I made a bunch of these little prints of the little Ninja Scouts doing stuff, and the idea behind that was it was just supposed to be like they would never ever reach total whatever the top peak is for the Scouts because the badges were going to be ridiculous, like opening cans or just sometimes mundane things or sometimes ridiculous things like slaying a dragon on Thursday night after Monday night, after watching
Hmm.
football or something, just something really obscure. And then I made so it was all a lot of comedy of errors of the illustrations, and so I did a bunch of those. And then I really wanted them. I think I started the comic on my own like twice or I think three times. I did one that was black and white, and of course each time the characters had changed a little bit.
Hmm.
And then by the third time, I was like, man, I really want to do this book, but I keep getting to a certain point and I get stuck. And then we were driving out to a Comic-Con, Aaron and I was like, would you be my partner in this and help me write this? And he agreed. So we wrote it up. And so we were at Planet Comic-Con. What year was that? Maybe 2017, 2016. And Go Comics, if you know who that is, Go
Hmm.
Comics.
Hmm.
Go
Hmm.
Comics is syndicated, and so they had like Calvin and Hobbes and Ziggy and Charlie Brown, the Peanuts, and so they had a table there, and so I dropped those off. I dropped off my little mini prints with the Ninja Scouts on them and my business card, and like that was like on a weekend, and then by Monday I had heard back from an editor saying, what are these are wonderful, what are these, what do you want to do with these?
Hmm.
And then so we just went from there, and so we got a deal to be where we so Chop Suey was syndicated on Go Comics for about 2 or 3 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so Aaron and I had kind of moved on because we did it, and we thought it was brilliant. It was so much fun. It was it was a lot of dad jokes and visual gags, and we had a small following on that. We had some really devout, like a small like handful of fans, maybe five, devout fans on Go Comics, and then after, we just couldn't figure out why nobody was looking at it, and we figured maybe we're just on the wrong platform and not getting the right eyes on it.
Hmm.
But we continued. We did, and if you did really well, you would get a contract from um who owns Go Comics? It's Andrews McMeel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
And so so we never got. We thought it was a shoe in. It was like we're in a year we're going to be doing good. We're going to finish this up. We're going to get our book contract, and we're going to be like and it never happened. And so I think we both went our separate ways, and it just stayed there. And they just kept renewing the contract, even though the story was over,
Hmm.
because we kind of did it in like a comic strip format, but yet it was still a graphic novel, like still continued on and connected. And so one day I'm sitting there, and I usually go every Saturday to hang out with friends, and I draw friends, and I have a couple artists and a writer and a couple writers, and my buddy Ed LaValle is like, he goes, Scoot Comics, which is a subsidiary, which is a imprint for Scout Comics.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
it's it's the kid book imprint, and he goes there. He goes, why don't you submit Chop Suey to them? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I kept putting it off, and finally he convinced me, and I finally sent it off. And then I heard back from the editor. It was like 24 hours, and he's like, I love this. Come, we need to talk. And so we we did that, and that was pretty awesome. So Simon Schuster's the distributor,
Hmm.
but Scoot/Scout is the one that actually is publishing it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I'm with you. I feel the same way. I feel like I feel more since Simon Schuster actually we have a page for the
Yeah,
book, and I
yeah,
also have an author page in there. I feel like it's more like Simon Schuster than through Scout myself, which I'm hoping. And if anything happens out of this, I would like to get a literary agent, because I have some other ideas for kid stuff.
yeah. That would be wonderful.
But I still have I've excuse me, I've done comic book covers since I started that, and I sorry. So
You're
yeah,
good. You're good.
I did that, and I did covers for Behemoth Comics for my bud Ed,
Hmm.
and I've done
Hmm.
some other covers for Scout as well. And so what's good about covers is I can just do one and done. I don't have to sit there and draw 12, 24 pages of stuff, and then
Right.
because usually a cover will take me, if I'm doing really good, it would probably take me a day and a half maybe, because I also have a day job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so that's there, and then the chop suey was just supposed to be. It was so much fun because I didn't want to use guns or knives, because I wanted to be able for kids to read it,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so we just used ridiculousness, and like there's one that has a lawn flamingo as a weapon,
Yeah.
and then one has a churro, and it's just it's just cartoon violence. It's just, and then I also told Aaron, I was like, well, let's put, there's a message at the end too, and we did do a message about trying, and and just keep going and not being discouraged. And sometimes in order for something to work for you, you have to do your thing to make it work,
Hmm.
which is why we have Barry the wrestling bear, and he wanted to do origami all his life, but his dad was like, I ain't having no paper folder in my household, and so he became a wrestling bear joined the Buffalo Bills wrestling circus, and so when he finds Tofu, who's a master of origami, he's like, oh my gosh, he's finally his chance to learn origami like he's always wanted to learn. But
Hmm.
his hands, and he's too strong, and he keeps ripping the paper, and
Right.
so he has
Right.
to figure out. So he has to learn how to figure out how it works for him, which is really cool. And then just we have Dark Miso in there, and he wants to be evil, but he's just, I think he's there's just something about him that evil just doesn't work for him as hard as he
Uh-huh.
tries.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we have Tofu, who's the he's the origami master, and he's crossing the Great Plains of North Dakota to go see Princess Snow-Pea, who's like the scrapbooking master, and he wants to learn how to scrapbook. And on his way there, he runs into the Ninja Scouts, and they're having a bake sale, and they're trying to strong arm him into buying cookies so they can uh, make enough money to buy into Dark Miso's his evil pyramid marketing scheme,
Hmm.
and they don't have the money when he shows up, and so he's kind of like go kick rocks, kids. And so
Oh,
he's on his way to go see Princess Snow Pea, also because he wants to kidnap her so she can record his exploits in scrapbook format and form for all the stuff that he does in his flying treehouse. It's actually in a tree, and it's a
hmm.
house, and it actually flies.
Love the creativity. Love
Oh
it.
yeah, and that's the one part I liked about it, was just being Chop Suey was just being creative. And to go back about the weapons, I was like, I was like, it's easy just to draw guns, knives, and swords, and then
Hmm. Hmm.
I said, but to sit there and figure out what kind of ridiculous weapon would I give this person, and it would just be funny. It just was so much more creative to work around all the violence and swords and guns, and just work around it. And also, and the other thing I like to do, what's wrong with this picture? You remember the
Hmm.
highlights all the time, highlights
Yes.
as a kid.
Uh-huh.
And I like to add those Easter eggs in there, like, just kind of what's wrong with this picture, or what, things that aren't supposed to be there,
Hmm. Hmm.
and just to see who's paying attention. And it just makes me giggle, when I put stuff in there. And yeah, so we went from all that stuff, and then we did the Chop Suey, which was a lot of fun. And then I have some other kid stuff, but lately I've been working on non-kid stuff because I want to see how this kicks off. Because we
Hmm.
have a
Hmm.
second book planned, which I think is even funnier than the first one. And we have some new characters to add and whatnot. So we'll see what happens. I was like, I would really like I said, I really would like to get a literary agent out of this if we could, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you have creative directions going forward. You mentioned Aaron Walther. Any other collaborators that you've enjoyed working with or would like to work with in the future?
See, I've worked with Evan Pose. I can't, sorry, Evan, if I messed up your name. Pozios, Pozios, I think
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it's Greek. I worked with him. He was fun to work with. I don't know. I think the more the more I did stuff, the more I think I think once we did, I think I was pretty disappointed in 2017 when Chop Suey did not get the recognition and did not sell, and stuff just didn't happen for us. And
Mhm.
it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And it was just that, some other things. And I'm like, why aren't we? We should be in a better place than where we're at, since with all the comics and stuff we've made. And
Right.
then I had I was at a con one day, and somebody was passing out business cards for tabletop games. The guy was uh, he was the uh, art director for a tabletop game company.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was the only artist that gave him the time of day because everyone else was, so into comics. And so I actually left comics for about 2 or 3 years and drew for tabletop games. Just nothing big like D&D or anything like that. Just indie stuff.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
still, and then when I was doing that, I got to step back from comics a little bit and realize some of the stuff that, some of the things that weren't real that I was holding on to about comics that I wanted to do.
Hmm.
Like, I stepped back because when I was a kid, I only read X-Men and anything with Wolverine in it because I just loved Wolverine and Conan. And after that, I really didn't read any of the big two at all. I
Hmm.
read more heavy metal and epic comics, which was, I think, it was more like the indie kind of version of stuff. I think Marvel put it out, but I read almost all of those, and a lot of, like, Timothy Truman Scout, and
Hmm. Hmm.
just, I mean, even before it was popular, like New England Comics, I believe it was called. We put out the Tick.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and I just read a lot of indie stuff, and I forgot all about that until I left, and I was like, why are you trying to do this when you this is the stuff you actually like, like. And also
Yeah.
the other thing I like to add in there is Garbage Pail Kids,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
with all that cartoon snot and slime and stuff. And I was like, so I started adding. And then also the other thing, I liked Simon Beasley, and so I started
Hmm.
getting a bunch of his books, in like Lobo books and stuff, and started reading those. And all of a sudden, it clicked. I was like, man. And so once I started drawing once I started drawing the stuff that I liked and the things that I like to draw,
Hmm.
and I also switched over because I tried to use everyone else's tools to make work the way I wanted it to, and it just I don't know, I just it's just the way I work, I guess. I because in comics I always felt like it's perfect pencils, perfect inks, and then you throw your colors on and you're done. And I'm like, I just as an illustrator, I'm like I'm more of a push and pull and let and and layering. You
Hmm.
layer it's like you layer this. I'm like, well, this needs to be pulled out now. So you go back and you fix that, and then this one needs to be pushed back more in the image. So doing it, inks, pencils, inks, and colors just really didn't work for me. It just wouldn't work in my head. So
Hmm.
I started using Posca pens, these ink pens. I mean, they're paint pens. They're
Mm.
acrylic ink. And once I started those, everything changed because I could go back through and rather than like a big area and it has just a couple white lines in it, I could just completely color the whole thing black. And then with the paint pens, draw back into the black with white. And I'm like, oh. And then
Hmm.
also with the paint pens, I could clean up my shapes. I could correct stuff. And then sometimes I'll be like, I'm like, you know what? I was like, let's Rob Liefeld this guy here. Let's add some pouches to his belt, even though I'd already started inking stuff. And I
Yeah.
could go back through and add stuff just like as if you were painting.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
really made a huge difference on my stuff. So and then I also felt like since I started doing like hillbilly, like rednecky kind of stuff. The guys with the big, missing teeth and greasy hats and stuff. And once I started drawing all that stuff and robots, which I had a maintenance background in the Air Force, and I fixed copiers, and I was a technical manager at Chuck E. Cheese where I fixed the robot and all the games and
Oh,
rides and
nice,
stuff. Right.
nice. Yeah.
So I took that thing. I was like, well, they always tell writers write what you know, and I was like,
Hmm.
but they never tell artists draw what you know.
Hmm.
And I have a
Hmm.
mechanical background, so I did a whole bunch of robot pictures and stuff. And I have like these prints I make. They look like old 1950s and 60s sci-fi magazine covers and stuff.
Nice, nice.
And so once I started drawing the stuff that I liked, and I started drawing the things and the stuff, everything went really well. It was like it was. I always tell people, it's like and also that white knuckle grasp on the comic dream since I was in sixth grade.
Hmm.
And you ever gave blood and you're not good with needles and they make a fist and then you're like they said okay you can let your fist go. You're like I can't because the needle's stuck in your arm. It was really hard to let that comic book dream go. And
Hmm.
once I did, it just seemed like everything fell into place because
Yeah.
I did really good in the games. I mean, in comics, I was what I used to say. In comics, I was a big nobody, but in games, I was a small somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just seemed like my success in games and indie games started spilling back over into comics, and I started having people contact me about making comics again. And I was like, wow. Well, actually, not again because no one ever. I mean, so it was. So I tell people it's like meeting women. If you're desperate, if you're so like, and I always tell people about desperate about making your comic and getting published. I was like, no one's going to come near you until you don't care about it anymore. And once you don't care about it anymore, that's when you'll get the opportunities coming to you. Just like meeting, like you're so desperate you want to fall in love with a girl or whatever, meet that girl. I said,
Hmm.
but once you don't care anymore, you got a gravy stain in your shirt and you got hands full of pizza at Pizza Street or something. That's when you're going to meet the person, and then and it's the same thing with opportunity. I think as well. Opportunity doesn't knock if you're desperate.
Yeah.
I don't
Love it, love it. We've got the comics advice, we've got the dating advice. I love it. Now I want to eat some pizza. I love it. So by means of a final official question, if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, where do I go to see Ed's work? Where would be the place or places that I would be
know.
going?
I have a ArtStation account,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I haven't updated that in a while, but there's some good stuff there. And then most of the time, I post almost if I'm not trying to meet deadlines. Most of the time, I post every day because I think do a thing called lunch art where I'll draw my lunch, and so I'll post stuff on Facebook, Instagram, and whatever Twitter's called these days, X or Twitter. I'm confused.
It's
because
a
I noticed
confusing place.
it says X, but if you go to check out what your address is, it still says Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that, and I was posting on LinkedIn for a little bit, but I don't know. I've never really received any work off of LinkedIn ever. It was very disappointing because you would be like, oh my gosh, an art director from Disney just liked my stuff. What's going to happen next? And
Hmm.
it was just a like, dude,
Right, right,
I was just passing by and accidentally hit like as I was scrolling up.
right, right.
So I
Yeah.
really don't post that much on LinkedIn that much anymore. But yeah, Facebook is mostly where you can find me because that's where most of my work I've ever received is people asking me on Facebook, would you do that for my book too? I'm like, sure.
Hmm. Love it, love it. Well, looking forward to the work that is to come, and I love the story that you shared of kind of working across media and then the love of comics being one of those like mainstays as you've gone through. So, thanks so much for taking some time to talk with me. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share?
Um, I don't know. I hope I answered all the questions. Uh, it's just, I would just, I always tell people now, from my experience, draw what you like with
Hmm.
with your favorite pencil, your favorite pen, your favorite colors, your favorite paper,
Hmm.
your favorite things, and your favorite things you like. And when I mean like is like I like robots or you like this or that, but there's also things that you like to draw too. Like there's certain everyone always has a certain aesthetic to their things.
Hmm.
So make sure you incorporate that in there as well. If you're just true, if you do you, your audience will find you.
Love it.
And just don't be discouraged.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Ed, and glad to have you back anytime to talk comics and all the things.
Yeah, I'm glad to come back anytime. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.